I have fought against white domination. And I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society.
Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
In which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities.
Marshals of the National Reception Committee trying to get the people, and a salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela, his wife Winnie.
It is an idea for which I hope to live and to see.
Extremely sad and tragic news. We're just reminded of what an extraordinary and inspiring man Nelson Mandela was. And my thoughts and prayers are with him and his family right now.
But my Lord, if it need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
There aren't many world leaders capable of generating such goodwill towards them as Nelson Mandela. He was a man different to all others. A man that sacrificed everything he could for his ideals. The legacy he left for the future generations is a legacy of hope, kindness, and equality. South Africa was never the same after Mandela's presidency, and will never be the same after his departure. A man with such a vision and capable of gathering attention towards him, he became a threat and was considered by many as a dangerous terrorist. And for the 27 years he was in prison, he suffered not only physical and verbal abuse, but also psychological hardship. But Nelson Mandela kept going, and even in prison, he managed to become a symbol for millions of people in South Africa and all over the world.
Friends, I am privileged to be here today at the invitation of the campaign to make poverty history. As you know, I recently formally announced my retirement from public life.
It looks like there is a deficit when it comes to the supply of heroes, and Madiba has been conveniently looked upon as someone who could fill that gap, and that is why we have made him into a saint.
His life and story touched many people worldwide. And at the time of his passing, the entire world wanted to pay homage.
ضعف الفلاش لأنه On behalf of the State of Israel, I want to salute his memory and bless his greatness. In Jerusalem, we shall pray for his memory.
It was a very, very sad news. There are some persons that we should never hear about their death. And Nelson Mandela is precisely one of those persons, a person that we don't like to see disappear.
Continue. Tout ce qui était fait pour nous Madiba, la lutte continue. Tout ce qu'a fait pour nous Madiba.
Sad, just feel sad and pray. It's not much meaning. Now we must develop determination or enthusiasm to carry his spirit.
Nelson Mandela is a man that is respected and whose life is celebrated all over the globe. Not only as a black leader, but also as a humanitarian and a symbol for freedom. The heritage that Madiba left behind will surely be followed and upheld in the future. The struggle and human suffering that built that legacy will never be forgotten. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18th, 1918, on the province of Mvezo in South Africa. And he passed away in the same place he was born on December 5th, 2013, aged 95. During his latter years, Mandela spent many hours being treated in hospital.
Former President Mandela remains in a critical condition in hospital. The doctors are doing everything possible to ensure his well-being and comfort. I was with the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa. Given the hour that we go to the hospital, of course it was late. He was already asleep, and we were there, looked at him, saw him, and we then had a bit of a discussion with the doctors, as well as his wife, Graça Machar, and we left. I don't think I can be in a position to give further details. I'm not a doctor.
And in June 2013, it was expected that Madiba would pass away, since his family, alongside the doctors, decided to turn off the life support that was keeping him alive.
It didn't surprise me, because I've been talking to the family, and I remember when they took life support off and everything else, and he's a strong dude, you know, but I got myself prepared for it, because it's hard with a guy like that.
And once again, Madiba fought his way through. Not only could he live without the life support, but his health improved. the decision was made to take him to his hometown, where he spent his final months. He was surrounded by his family and the people he always loved.
He's just there, the same energy, the same strength. And I think, you know, I don't think he's the type of person who would feel comfortable in a hospital environment. He looks very much forward to going home. And we kept saying to him, like, every day, you have to get well. We have to have your 95th birthday together. We have to have lunch at home. Well, unfortunately, I'm not too sure that he's going to be back home with us tomorrow, but I think it's going to be anytime soon. Seeing him, like, I could see him perfectly through this glass partition, but I couldn't touch him because we had this partition separating us. 3 prison warders on either side. And in those days, we used to talk through a phone. It was at some stage it was through a phone, and at another stage just through some kind of little speaker thing. So it was very, for me, like I was robbed of the privacy even then, because despite the fact that my mother was with me as I sat down to speak to him, the presence of these hostile people around us made it very difficult for me, you know, to be able to concentrate even on the fact that I was seeing my father for the first time. Because all I wanted to see what his hands looked like. I wanted to see, you know, how tall he was. And interestingly enough, they never would allow us to see him stand. We always found him seated. So like, so studying his mannerisms and just wanting to see which mannerisms are familiar. But I picked up that early on what an influential and charming man he is, because he made me just imagine that we were all at home sitting in front of a fireplace and I'm sitting on his lap and he's reading me a story. And the more like he created this picture, the more, you know, this hostility and harsh environment faded into the background, and I was able to then enjoy the visit, which of course was always too short. I used to get angry, you know, like there was a time when I was bitter, and that bitterness was still there when he came out. But, you know, with maturity and with a lot of introspection, you know, I came to a point where I realized that I had to let it go, because bitterness would hold me back and anger would hold me back. And to appreciate more, you know, what he stood for, and to actually interact with him, to say, you know, like, the bitterness was mostly from not being able to express, like how I felt abandoned and neglected. But the closer I grew to him, especially when he retired from the presidency, and I would speak to him about those moments and like just take him down memory lane, I just used those opportunities of sharing those memories.
Nelson Mandela grew up and was raised by the regent of the Thembu people, Jojintaba Delindiebu. After being expelled from the University of Fort Hare for participating in student protests, Mandela fled to Johannesburg, where he had his first look at South African capitalism in action. He found a job working in the mines, but he would soon be fired after the headman had discovered he was a runaway. During this period, South Africa was under the rule of an oppressive regime. With the victory of Daniel Malan in the general elections of 1948, the apartheid legislation was codified and approved. The law allowed the government to expand racial segregation. Mandela soon became political. In his first TV interview, Nelson Mandela demanded his people into action.
The Africans want the franchise on the basis of one man, one vote. They want political independence.
Do you see Africans being able to develop in this country without the European being pushed out?
We have made it very clear in our policy that South Africa is a country of many races. There is room for all the various races in this country.
Are there many educated Africans in South Africa?
Yes. We have a large number of Africans who are educated and who are taking part in the political struggles of the African people. The question of education has nothing to do with the question of the vote. The On numerous occasions, it has been proved in history that people can enjoy the vote even if they have no education. Of course, we desire education, and we think it's a good thing. But you don't have to have education in order to know that you want certain fundamental rights, you have got aspirations, you have got claims. It has nothing to do with education whatsoever.
Are you planning any more campaigns of non-cooperation?
Yes. The Pietermaritzburg resolution makes provision for a campaign of non-cooperation with the government, and we are presently studying plans to implement this aspect of the resolution.
Now, if Dr. Verwoerd's government doesn't give you the kind of concessions that you want sometime soon, is there any likelihood of violence?
There are many people who feel that the reaction of the government to our stay at home, ordering a general mobilization, arming the white community, arresting 10,000s of Africans, the show of force throughout the country, notwithstanding our clear declaration that this campaign is being run on peaceful and non-violent lines, close the chapter as far as our methods of political struggle are concerned. There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home, whether the methods which we have applied so far are adequate.
The apartheid government became even more ruthless, especially towards those who appeared defiant. Nelson Mandela became part of the African National Congress, the ANC. This would take most of Mandela's time, and his first marriage to nurse Evelyn Mace ended after accusations of adultery. In 1958, Mandela married social worker Winnie Madikizela. But only a few months later, Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment for organizing defiance actions.
The day the trial came to an end, the leaders of the African National Congress came home. They came to celebrate the results of the trial and the fact that they had been acquitted. My husband did not even enter the house. They were all jubilant and they were standing outside. I still remember very vividly Joe Modise, who is now heading the military wing of the ANC, walked into the house and asked me to pack a few items for my husband. I did, and I gave him the suitcase. And all I was told was that I'll be seeing him in a few days' time. I never really knew much about his political activities because I think they felt it was better that way. He left with the rest of the leadership that day. That was the last time I saw my husband at home.
That was the most unmarried woman because we really never lived together. We lived together for a few months before he became the Black Permanent. Our communication as family was always through the letters. And when he was in prison, through the bars, the prison bars.
My little daughter Zinzi was about 6 years. she was playing outside, and then she came into the house and said, "Mommy, you say Daddy is in prison because he is fighting for the black people." I said, "Yes, darling." And then she said, "But now you say all the black men fight for the black people so that they should have all the things the whites have in this country, isn't it?" I answered her. I said, "Yes." And then she said, "But next door, Mommy, their father is there at home. Why is my father in jail and not the father next door?" In our Sikh society, when a man hasn't been to prison, you look twice at that black man. How is it possible that in racist South Africa he hasn't been to prison?
Mandela had been held in Robben Island prison since 1964. Nelson Mandela heard the news of his mother's death in 1968 and of his eldest son Thembi in 1969. He was not allowed to go to their funerals. He spent his days breaking rocks and suffering abuse from the prison guards. Still, he managed to work on his law degree at night and engaged in work and hunger strikes to improve prison conditions.
I think he was. I would say he is. Because his example is stronger than death. He's a great inspiration for many people around the world because of his fight for freedom, for his courage, but also because of his spirit of reconciliation and peace.
While in prison, protests and international pressure pushed the South African government into a corner regarding Mandela's captivity. During this time, President P.W. Botha permitted colored and Indian citizens to vote, but black Africans were excluded in an attempt to divide the anti-apartheid movement. Violence broke out across the country. A state of emergency was declared. The ANC demanded Mandela's release in an attempt to stop the violence.
Our leaders called on President Botha to remove violence, to free all those who have been imprisoned, and to allow the return of all those who have been driven into exile. To unban the People's Organization, the African National Congress, to dismantle apartheid, to allow free political activity so that the people may decide who will govern. We call upon the world to accept these demands.
Manifestations of support spread across the globe. In London, Wembley Stadium was completely full for a concert to pressure the apartheid government to release Mandela. Free Mandela was heard and seen everywhere you looked. Street protests in New York and South Africa showed the world how everyone was united for Mandela's release. The new South African president, F.W. de Klerk, after many meetings and extensive negotiations, finally announced what everyone wanted to hear.
Our country and all its people have been embroiled in conflict, tension, and violent struggle for decades. It is time for us to break out of the cycle of violence and to break through to peace and reconciliation. The silent majority is yearning for this. The youth deserving. With the steps the government has taken, it has proven its good faith, and the table is laid for sensible leaders to begin talking about a new dispensation. In this connection, Mr. Nelson Mandela could play an important part. The government has noted that he has declared himself to be willing to make a constructive contribution to the peaceful political process in South Africa. I wish to put it plainly that the government has taken a firm decision to release Mr. Mandela unconditionally. I am serious about bringing this matter to finality without delay. The government will take a decision soon on the date of his release.
On February the 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela took his first steps as a free man.
The ANC flags. And one wonders what must be passing through Mr. Mandela's mind at this moment. The day he has also been waiting for. Excitement, people breaking through the barriers, the human barriers of the marshals who intended to keep Mr. Mandela free so that everybody could see him. An excited crowd. They've been standing in the sun the whole day, waiting for this moment. And the crowd getting excited. There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa. Mrs. Winnie Mandela next to him, waving to the crowds. Hand in hand, they leave the Victor Verster prison. Officials, marshals of the National Reception Committee trying to get the people, and a salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela, his wife Winnie, greeting the people outside the fences of the Victor Verster prison. That is the man who the world has been waiting to see. His first public appearance in nearly 3 decades.
I don't think one can actually describe that. One of those things that you had to be there.
It was a hot day, and I was out and about and waiting for that cavalcade to come through. By the time it came through, I was exhausted. There was also a mini riot going on at the back of the Grand Parade at the same time, and you had that tension that you didn't know whether this incredible event would at any point go wrong, and that this man who had spent so many years in prison was actually going to be assassinated. We all had that in the back of our minds.
Up until then, Madiba was a slogan on a t-shirt, slogan on a poster, and then saw the person, the actual person. I don't remember seeing him as an old failed person. I just saw Madiba, so that was Madiba.
You could sort of visibly see how Nelson Mandela onto the balcony was almost sort of closing the door on the past and opening the door to the future.
Mr. Mandela, Mrs. Thatcher has invited you to go to London at some stage. What do you hope you might achieve by a visit to Britain at this time?
Well, an invitation from the British Prime Minister is something very important. which must be treated very seriously, to have the support of the British Prime Minister, the British government, and the British people would give further momentum to the struggle in the country for change and for the dismantling of apartheid.
But is it going to be a long process?
Well, I hope not, because we have made it easy for him that an agreement should be reached as soon as possible. As far as we are concerned, we are fully prepared to cooperate in easing problems with him once we are convinced that he wants to write a new chapter in the history of the country.
And what is the immediate demands that you're making on the government, which they haven't actually done yet, like lifting the state of emergency?
Yes, quite, releasing political prisoners, allowing exiles to return, withdrawing the army from the locations, and generally creating conditions for free political activity in the country. Those are the demands.
The outside world is a fairly violent place these days, though. How much have you been able to keep in touch with what has been happening over the last 27 years?
In a general way, of course, at first it was very difficult because we didn't get newspapers. We had no access to the radio and to television. But once we had access to all these means of sources of information, we were able, to follow events inside and outside the country.
One final question, Mr. Mandela. After 27 years being locked up, do you feel that your life has been wasted?
Yes and no. To spend 27 years in prison, you see, you lose a lot. But at the same time, although prison is not the place for any human being, one was able to reflect, to think, and that this has been rewarding.
The first time I met him, it was the 20th March 1990, the day of independence of Namibia, in Windhoek. He was not yet President of the Republic. He told me about his plans for a future democratic, free South Africa. He asked me about the efforts we were deploying in Portugal for peace in Angola and Mozambique and in other countries. And already in that moment, he provoked in me a great impression. In these kind of functions, we are in contact with many, many politicians. But the true charisma, not everyone has it. This was the case of a true charisma. Someone who, with a great simplicity, with a great modesty, was well aware that he had a mission.
In 1993, F.W. de Klerk and Mandela received the Nobel Peace Prize together. After that, Madiba set his eyes on the presidency.
As the election date draws closer, so the campaigning becomes ever more intense. Nelson Mandela electioneering in the key province of Natal. And he chose a township just outside Durban to tell the crowds it would be here where he would cast his vote.
I am going to be here in Natal. I want to vote here to come and vote here.
His schedule is one that campaign staff are finding hard to keep up with, but it's also a sign of Mr. Mandela's eagerness for the political fray and his stamina. He'll be 76 years old next birthday. It also indicates the importance of this region to the ANC's election campaign. This township has been the scene of recent fierce fighting between Zulus who support the ANC and those who back in Carter. Now it is an ANC stronghold, and at a local stadium they flock to Mr. Mandela's banner in their tens of thousands. This is the second time in a fortnight that Mr. Mandela has visited Natal. That and his decision to cast his vote here is a measure of the political importance that both he and his campaign staff now place on the area. Before a predominantly Zulu audience, Mr. Mandela pledged his support for the Zulu King's call for an end to the violence. King Zwelithini is a key figure for most Zulus, and all the main leaders know the value of courting him.
It was a strong call to all of us. I was very happy His Majesty came out openly against violence because he is not just my leader, he is my king.
But despite the support the ANC has here, this is also a region under a state of emergency. And although many do want to vote, others remain bitterly opposed to elections here. With that in mind, 900 more troops are moving in to reinforce the 3,000 already on the ground.
On the election day, lines of hundreds and thousands of people were seen all over the country. All wanted to cast their vote.
In prison, there have been men, who are very good in the sense that they understand our point of view and they do everything to try and make you as happy as possible. And that has wiped out any bitterness which a man could have.
On May the 10th, 1994, Madiba took office as President of the Republic of South Africa.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, distinguished guests, comrades and friends, today all are stirred by our presence here and by our celebrations in other parts of our country and the world confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud.
We were in a state of wonderment. Now, it lasted very little. I mean, the state of wonderment meant that we were like going to school and there's a headmaster sitting there, a nice headmaster, beneficent headmaster. He came and shook hands with you. You felt somehow that there was gold dust in your hand. I tell you that. I mean, I'm not being naive or simple. You have gold dust in your hand. But then you realize that Mr. Mandela didn't want you to feel that you had gold dust in your hand.
I had opportunity meeting him. Very nice. And then I consider serious follower of Mahatma Gandhi.
There is no doubt that the quality of the people concerned has changed. The quality of ministers, deputy ministers, has changed from Mr. Mandela's first government. I mean, Mr. Mandela's first government was remarkable in terms of racial composition, gender was really remarkable, high quality.
After he became president, he still carried his sort of belief, non-violence, equality, these things. But then also Bishop Tutu carry, I think, a very, very sort of effective reconciliatory sort of movement.
South Africa changed for the best with Mandela. But despite all his suffering and the sacrifices he made for equality and harmony amongst all, South Africa remains to this day a divided nation.
Mandela is a peaceful man. That's exactly what Mandela wants. Mandela wants us to work together. Tata wants us all to be together. But there's no changes yet. It's still like that. So really, it will be a miracle if it changes in 20 years' time.
Economically, we are still lagging behind because the purse strings are still the main purse strings are still being controlled by our white counterparts.
The white people wants to interact with black people. Black people don't want to really interact with white people. And that gives you a negative at work as well. Because white people want to work with the black people don't want to work with the white people because they think previously disadvantaged, they want more.
Madiba changed the history of his country, and his people will forever remember him for his kindness and the dedication to their struggle.
We want him back, you know. Although he's an old man, but he's an icon to us, a hero to us. We will still want his diplomacy.
Let us recommit ourselves to building a better future for all South Africans, black and white. Let us pursue the ideal for which Madiba has fought his entire life.
I think he's been an important figure in history. He's done extraordinary things, not just for his own country. I think he's been a sort of touchstone for others. You see messages from the entire world, for a man who's perhaps different to all others.
In this new century, millions of people in the world's poorest countries remain imprisoned, enslaved, and in chains. They are trapped in the prison of poverty. It is time to set them free.
Madiba was a great man, and at the age of 95, the world started to prepare for the last goodbye to an icon.
When my grandfather would ask me when I completed my matric what you wanted to be, I immediately say I want to be a DJ. He says, what's a DJ? I say a disc jockey. Nonsense. no Mandela will ever become such. You need to go out and find a career. So my grandfather has really been the driver behind the person that I needed to be. He then pulled me out about 2002. You need to go back home. I want you to study further. And I thought that was bizarre because I had studied what I thought I had an interest on, which is marketing and business management. I had 2 businesses of my own, and I thought this was the path I was following. But my grandfather had other plans and other thoughts. Upon my graduation, my grandfather said, "So, are you still that eager businessman you wanted to be?" And with his sense of humor, you know, he had seen that I had changed and I had become more community driven. And that's the lesson learned for my grandfather, that Mandelas are supposed to ensure that they are of service to our people.
Fighting illness for several years, Nelson Mandela spent his last year fighting for his life, and the entire planet came together once again to show their support for the great African leader.
He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Nelson Mandela was a beacon of hope for humanity. In 2013, a new film about his life premiered. The movie is called Mandela: The Long Walk to Freedom.
The accused are responsible for acts of sabotage with the intention of overthrowing the government.
Nelson Mandela, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
My lord, it is not I but the government that should plead guilty.
You'll never leave your... You will never touch a woman or a child again. It's a pity they didn't hang you. I'm going to make sure you wish they had.
The more they oppress us, the harder we fight.
Freedom, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Shall we begin?
We took the film 3 weeks ago back to Johannesburg, showed it to the family, showed it to the comrades, showed it to the men and women that had helped us with the story, and the emotion in that room was overwhelming, and everybody felt it was true to their struggle and true to them. So for us as filmmakers, that first screening was so important to get the people whose lives we're representing, to get their support and them believing in what we'd done was so important. So now to actually get it into the cinema and for audience to see it is incredibly exciting.
I mean, you know, we didn't want to make the bog standard biopic film, which is really sanctimonious, and just keep it sort of like, oh, it's a praise for you, you know, you're a great person, you're praise, praise, praise. But in this film, you know, we know that, you know, to highlight his good, we had to show where he'd come from and some of his bad and flaws, you know, and that was important, you know. It's a balance, you know, and also it's a modern technique in filmmaking to sort of take audiences back a little bit and go, whoa, 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 are you talking? You know, for us, it felt fresh to do that, and it felt honest. And, by the way, you know, the Nelson Mandela Foundation and Mr. Mandela himself, you know, said, go for it, you know, tell the truth about who we are. I want people to know what I'd gone through and who I was before I became the saint that everyone thinks I am.
Thank you for coming to join us in revisiting that turbulent journey that brought us here today. I have no words to describe the translation Anand came up with of that painful past. Go and sit back and revisit our history. The importance of this is also that we should remember where we come from, and that this freedom was hard-earned, and that It was won at a very, very heavy price. And we're here to celebrate not only Comrade Madiba, but all the men and women who perished in the Liberation War, and all those who did not make it back home, who left the country to fight for freedom for us to be here today.
The movie premiered in the UK on December 5th to an audience of distinguished guests. And while the guests were enjoying the movie, news broke out of Madiba's passing. In London, Prince William was the first one to react.
I just want to say it's obviously extremely sad and tragic news. We're just reminded of what an extraordinary and inspiring man Nelson Mandela was. And my thoughts and prayers are with him and his family right now. Thank you.
Look, I think my niece, Ndilega, she summarized it very well, where she said, I'm intellectually prepared to let granddad go, but emotionally I'm not. And I think it summarized it for all of us. I mean, like, to me, he's a father whom I spent many years without. I grew up like with no memories of him because I was 18 months old when he went to prison. So I value each and every second with him. And when he's at his most fragile, I obviously also get, I become afraid. I'm not too sure whether I would be prepared for any eventuality. Every moment that he's here with us, for me, is what I savor, and I just pray for more.
Yeah, I was in South Africa. In fact, I was shooting a little miniseries in Johannesburg in 1993. He was not president yet. And my son Ramon and I, who he's with me on this journey, had wanted to visit Soweto, and so we called the ANC, and they said, we're prepared to take you to Soweto, but there's a chance you could meet Mr. Mandela if you want to. Suddenly he burst in the door, and he just takes your breath away, And I gave him a timepiece that I'd bought for him, and we had a picture taken. And as we posed for the picture, I put my hand on his back to face the camera, and I withdrew immediately because I could feel his shoulder blade. And I was so embarrassed because I felt I had invaded his personal space. But he wasn't at all upset or concerned. He just said, I'm skinny. I said, oh. And he couldn't have been more gracious. And it was one of the great moments of my life. You don't get a chance to meet your heroes, particularly an international hero like that, a man who literally changed the world, You don't have to do great things, but we do have to do all things with a greater sense of urgency, I think. Greater care, really,
Madiba was a man like no other, and a peacemaker between two sides that couldn't agree peace. And while the world mourned the departure of a great man, his hometown of Kunu was getting ready to give its last goodbye to an illustrious person. The funeral of Nelson Mandela took place in his hometown. And in the hour of remembrance, the world leaders got together for the celebrations of his life.
I mean, he was the defining unifier of different communities and different peoples, and he had this extraordinary ability not to carry bitterness with him from his 27 years in prison.
Let's also celebrate the goodness that came from this wonderful man. And we know as South Africans that, here's a person who was in the struggle, in the forefront of the struggle, led the struggle for our freedom, for our liberty, got imprisoned, got tortured, but when he came back, he didn't come back a bitter man. And all of us as young people in the ANC then learned so much from this wonderful man, that when you harbor bitterness, you fail to lead. And that's why Madiba was able to lead, because he didn't harbor bitterness. But he was also able to reconcile almost things that are irreconcilable. Those that were on the receiving end of the apartheid state, those who were neglected, those who didn't have any political or economic rights, Madiba came out and said, can we all hold hands? Those who were in apartheid and those who were fighting apartheid, let's hold our hands and be the South Africa of the future. That's magnificent. It's something, that's what people call a miracle in South Africa. We avoided a bloodbath even in the course of the negotiations, as you will know. One of our dearest leaders, again, Chris Hani, was killed in 1993 when we were busy with the negotiations, unfortunately killed by segments of the apartheid state, white conservatives. Madiba said, for us to win this, let's go to the polls and vote for a government of our choice. Let's not go there and hack people's heads and then throw the entire country into turmoil. Let's continue with the negotiations. Now, people could listen to Madiba because he had the moral authority.
On the day of his funeral, the world got together around their televisions to follow the last steps of Madiba, from Pretoria to Kunu. His funeral was of the highest standard. The world followed every moment. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela will forever be remembered as an icon, a fighter, an idealist, but above all, a kind and benevolent man.
A much better man than almost any man or woman I've met in my whole career. He inspired us. He challenged us to do better. He was a good man who changed the world and the way we see it. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said, "A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination." My mother used to say, "You are defined by your courage and you are redeemed by your loyalty." Few people I've ever met in my life, and I've had a chance to meet every major world leader in the past 35 to 40 years, have met that test like Nelson Mandela.
Umandela lo abamaziyo abazange